The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. We continue to hear more and more as events about the Five Rivers Resort Project unfold, and here to discuss that very issue with us on this edition is Oshkosh Common Councilmember Bryan Bain. We're taping this on the 15th of June, just a few nights ago. There was a Common Council meeting at which Community Development Director Jackson Kinney gave the full council an update on where things are at, and we're going to try to kind of dissect some of that information and give it to you in layman's terms, I guess, tonight. So, Bryan, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
And we should just say, Bryan has another commitment tonight, so he'll be here for a portion of the show, and then we'll be breaking, and Tony and I will finish up. So with that, this has become more and more twisted and convoluted as time goes on. Now, that's my commentary on it. You know, one of the first things, I guess, that we should talk about is the term sheet, because that, of course, is one of the points of contention right now, and I think for a lot of the council members too, is that all of a sudden a couple weeks ago we all sort of found out, and we're all taken by surprise, I think, by the fact that you guys, when you approved the term sheet, and the other council members, you didn't approve on the extension of the term sheet.
Correct.
But when those term sheets were approved, it was basically approving, giving away your right to authorize and approve the final developer's agreement, correct?
Well, that's what we're hearing from Jackson Kinney, the Community Development Director, and also the City Manager, Richard Wallink. My contention is that we authorize the city to do negotiations and work on contracts all the time with our unions when we have those. We have them work with other developers on other projects. And my assumption was, just like any of other contract of this size, that we would authorize a term sheet which laid out some parameters for negotiation, because we were told all along term sheet equals negotiation. This is not a contract. And my thought, and I think along with every other council member up there, at least in terms of the last election, I think Tony pointed out in his citizen statements that a lot of the candidates even said they feel that it's coming back to the council as a vote. And then now we find out it's not. Right. That apparently the language in the document says that they can move forward and we don't have to approve with that. Now, I disagree with that. It does not clearly state that the council will not. And as I said at the council meeting, I'll take responsibility for the vote that I made on the first term sheet and on the second one, but on the first one I approved. And I said, you know, I guess I feel like we shouldn't have had to have asked. Now, we're going to get this back, right? Because I think this, a project of $60 million, of course it would come back to the council. And we were told this is negotiation, not a contract. So I assumed that once negotiations were over, we would have something to vote on. And now it's not there. So we should have asked, but I do kind of feel like, you know, in some respects, I feel a little duped on it almost, because I wish if city staff knew up front that we would never see this again, that they would have told us that. But I will still take responsibility for my vote. I mean, I think that's appropriate.
Well, and the interesting thing about that, and I appreciate your comments, Bryan, I really do, because you're willing to take responsibility for that. I think we were all duped, because every one of us made the same assumption that this was going to come back before the council. And that's why we asked candidates when we had them on,
right.
You know, how do you feel about the project, so on and so forth. But it did say if there was something substantial that changed. And of course, the little linchpin there is that city staff gets to determine if there were substantial changes.
Right.
So they basically are controlling this thing.
Yeah, and that's why I said in my statements at the meeting on Tuesday, I asked the city to do everything they can to bring this back to us. I feel like I'm going to give them the option to do that, and I think that I wish and hope that they do. If they don't, then I will ask Warren Kraft, the city attorney, what our options are, because I do feel that we should be voting on it. And I said at the meeting, if it met the term sheet, because we did say as a city, regardless of who voted on the term sheet, as a city we said, we will negotiate with you in this term sheet. And if you meet the term sheet, then we'll enter into that agreement and we'll go forward. So if it meets that, then we have to honor that, because in good faith we bargained with Mr. Doig, and I feel like we should do that. But we need to have that opportunity to do it. And the citizens aren't going to be able to talk about it if we don't bring it up at a meeting to actually vote on.
Right.
And that to me is an issue.
Exactly. Well, one of the points of contention for the last year or more has been the developer assistance grant,
Yes.
and whether it should be a pay-as-you-go or a direct pay. We come to find out that in the term sheet, it says that that's at the option of the developer, correct?
Well, I think that the developer gets to, I guess, ask what they would like to have in that process. In their finances, they would like to see either the pay-as-you-go or the direct pay.
But I think what Mr. Kinney is saying is that he doesn't just get to ask, he gets to decide. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Yeah, he
yes.
gets to choose what his option would be. That's what he's asking
Okay,
for.
well-
and then what happens on our end, which I've found out since then,
Right.
is that if he chooses the direct pay over the pay-as-you-go, ultimately he's going to get less money from the city, because we feel that we could do a little bit more assistance in a pay-as-you-go versus a direct pay.
See, my understanding, Brian, from the beginning was that the choice of direct pay versus pay-as-you-go was going to be based on which one would help the project move along.
Right.
But that it was going to ultimately be the city, which I define as the city council,
Council.
which would decide that.
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm hearing from the Department of Community Development.
Well, and I think Jackson did say that we would vote on the developer's assistant agreement. That piece would come back to the council in some form. He did say that in his comments on Tuesday night. So I don't know if, in essence, if the majority of the council, if what comes forward is a direct pay versus pay-as-you-go, and the council says, no, we would rather have pay-as-you-go, I guess we need to clarify right now with the city attorney what options we have to us, because I feel like I don't want to have to vote on something to vote on it just because I can't vote the other way.
Exactly.
Well, and with that, you know, if it was going to be left up to the developer to decide which one of these two options that he wanted, I mean, it doesn't even make sense that Jackson Kinney would be up there then saying, well, you know, the pay-as-you-go is my preferred method that we use because it ensures greater protection for the taxpayers.
Yeah.
What difference would it make? And by the same token, you know, we're hearing now that there are these risk mitigators built into either option, and so we're protected no matter which way Mr. Doig decides to go. Well, if we have just as much protection under a direct pay as we do under pay-as-you-go, then why would a pay-as-you-go option ever have been even presented?
Yeah.
You know, none of this makes any sense, and I think we all have been duped.
And I'm fine with the developer saying I would prefer X over Y. I'm fine with that, but I do think the ultimate authority needs to rest with the council in deciding, because again, go back to what Mr. Kraft said all along as our city attorney in the negotiations. This term sheet lays out, you know, I have some direct quotes. It's not a contract. It lays out some parameters, some terms, but it's not a contract. So we ultimately need to decide the final version of that contract.
Brian, it looks like Mr. Doig is getting C.D. Smith Construction to be the chief financier of this project. Can we assume that he probably tried to get traditional bank financing first? You would think he probably went to traditional sources first,
I would assume.
right? Especially since he came in at
Yeah.
literally the last second with this.
Past
Isn't
the last
that,
second.
in your judgment, at however big and powerful as C.D. Smith is, isn't it a red flag that he couldn't get more traditional financing?
Well, I would like to know. I would like to know why C.D. Smith was the chosen method of financing here. Did they come to the table and they wanted to be involved with this, or was it Mr. Doig could not get financing through the traditional means through banks and had to go to this route? We don't know, and that's a question that hasn't been answered. Why C.D. Smith's involved? My question now, though, is all along the way in all of our discussions we had as a council. Springstead, the financial consultants for the city, had said that we need to see developer investment, developer equity. We need to see takeout permanent long-term financing. And now that when I asked Mr. Kinney, I think 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 different ways on Tuesday, it doesn't seem like it's an issue now. And I just would like to know, if it's not, how did we get to that point? Tell me how we got to that point that it's no longer an issue. Because it sounds like to me C.D. Smith is doing construction financing. They really would prefer not to exercise their legal rights to run the business. That's not their role. They want to build it and be done. And if that's not the case, then, or if that's the case, that's construction financing. That's not the takeout permanent financing to do all the other stuff. And I think we need to make sure that that's still there.
As you know, Bryan, Cheryl and I filed an open meetings complaint
Right.
against the city council for a February 14th, I guess
Correct.
it was, closed
Yes.
meeting.
Correct.
The Oshkosh Northwestern filed an open meetings complaint on a somewhat different grounds than what we did.
I believe so.
Has the district attorney's office in Madison talked to you?
Not at all. Not at all.
Do you
Isn't that
know?
interesting?
Are you aware if they've talked to any counselors?
I don't know. No one said anything to me.
Because you were in the closed meeting.
Yes.
Are you prepared to tell us what went on in that closed meeting?
I did have a conversation with the DA, the county DAs, and one
county
of the
DA, okay.
investigators,
Okay.
and that was it. It was 3 or 4 questions from that individual about the meeting and what was discussed, and that was it.
That night, you didn't seem to be very convinced that a closed meeting was necessary. After you got out of that meeting, was something revealed to you that proved that, okay, this had to be closed?
Well, it was still a negotiation process, so there were still some terms that we were still willing to decide whether or not we would go A, B, or C route with the developer, and we had to decide what we wanted to, what our options were and what might we do in that
But the
process.
state, see, this is where I think it gets a little gray area, because the state law says the negotiations take place when there's a competitive environment.
Right.
Cheryl and I have not been clear, and many people in the community have not been clear from the beginning. Where's the competition here? This seems to have been a direct negotiation between Five Rivers and the city for about 2 years now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has there been any? Where's the competition?
Well, I go back to, and resting on what the city attorney said, is that this term sheet is not a contract, it's negotiation. It's negotiation terms, and we were still trying to settle on those terms of negotiation with Five Rivers.
But you're not aware of any other developer that has been looking at that land?
No one has come to me and said that they're looking at that, so I don't know of any other.
Well, in fact, I mean, I think several people, including Mr. Kinney himself, I believe it was at the council meeting the other night, said that if this does not go through, that things will be looked at with other people.
Yeah.
And so I think that we can pretty much infer from that there hasn't been anyone else that's approached the city
Yeah.
about this land, at least this particular parcel of land.
This particular
maybe
parcel.
some other portion in the TIF itself, but not that particular area.
Correct.
So
The question, I guess, now is where do we go from here, Bryan?
Well, I have after Tuesday night's meeting, I now have a couple more pages of questions to follow up with Mr. Kinney and Mr. Kraft on a couple of the items that were discussed. And I'm still not convinced, or I guess my whole issue here, even if we don't know the answer to the question, then let's just say in public we don't know the answer to the question. We're working on getting it. I think that's what a lot of people want at this point. We just want some sort of answer to the questions that we're asking, and not kind of this weaving in and out, or we're working on it. I think everyone wants the city to take due diligence. No one, even someone who is adamantly opposed to this, I think still would want the city, if they're going to go forward with it, they'd want them to be due diligence and go forward with due diligence. So no one's opposed to that, but we still need to have some answers along the way, even if it's, here's where we are right now, we don't have this locked up yet, but we project to have it in 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. I think that's the type of information that we need to
But
have.
hasn't the due diligence, Bryan, in effect become an extension? I mean, the council has not voted. Here we are, June 15th. The financing plan supposedly was in on May 31st.
Right.
Nothing's finalized. Doesn't that feel like an extension to you?
Well, and here's my question on that. In there, we discussed in the term sheet in number 3, A, E, F, and G talks about secure construction and permanent financing.
Yeah.
Is there permanent financing?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, it doesn't.
And to me, permanent financing is not necessarily that C.D. Smith would come in and run the business if Mr. Doig can't have the money at the end. That to me is not necessarily a permanent financing vehicle that would be satisfactory to me. And I'll go back to what I said when I voted against the term sheet extension. I lost that confidence in Mr. Doig in this process.
Sure.
And that's why I voted against it. I still like the idea of some sort of development in that area.
Sure.
And so for me, I need to be convinced that continue to work with Mr. Doig, that he's met the guidelines that we've laid out here, and that we can move forward in a confident manner that mitigates what we're going to have as a risk as a city. And I'm not there yet.
Right.
I'll be honest.
Well, Jackson Kinney the other night at the council meeting, Bryan, said that that they're trying to do this as quickly as possible,
Sure.
which of course they have been doing all along.
Yeah.
And he said that conceivably something could be back in front of you guys at your council meeting in 2 weeks. Is it possible? Because I think one of the things that the public would like to see is Mr. Doig's face at a council meeting explaining things. I don't think that he has been at a public meeting yet, at least where he has spoken. I mean, I try and stay as on top of things in the city as I could, and I would not be able to pick the man out in a crowd if I saw him.
Yeah.
And I think it's time that he show his face and explain things so that we can hear in his own words what it is he wants us to hear. I mean, is that possible to get him there?
It's certainly worth asking. I'll add it to my list of questions, or asking and or requesting that he be there. And the only meeting that I recall him attending was the original term sheet voting evening. I believe he was there that night.
Was he in the closed meeting too?
On the 14th?
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah, he was there
Okay.
for the initial part to give us some updates on where he's at
Okay.
with his end.
All right, I only have one more question on this topic,
Sure.
and it's with, I understood Mr. Kinney to say on Tuesday that if the C.D. Smith financing plan is acceptable, then the Five Rivers would not have to have any pre-sold units. Wasn't the original agreement he was going to have some units pre-sold before this thing were to go up?
I think we were asking for that
Right.
that to be in there,
All right,
yes.
does it make sense to you to have this kind of structure in place without any pre-sold units?
I certainly would feel much more comfortable with pre-sold units in this process, yes. We need to see some sort of outside interest
Yeah,
and involvement
exactly.
and investment in that process.
Because what it was sounding like to me, with all due respect to Mr. Kinney, it was sounding like his interest is in getting something built on that land. But I think the real interest has to be in stimulating activity in the whole downtown.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me if we don't have pre-sold units in a structure like that, we are playing with fire. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a correct statement to say the city may not be at risk once the building's built. We may not be, because we're going to collect taxes on it, and just like we would if it were, or I should say, if it's built and it's not fully functioning
Yeah.
versus functioning, we're still going to collect the same amount of taxes on that building.
We hope so.
We hope so. That would be the idea. But I would much rather see a vibrant, robust action going on down there
Yeah.
than I would just seeing the building sit there being run by C.D. Smith, in
Yeah.
one scenario,
I mean, I don't
by a
think
company who doesn't really want to run it.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say to the developer, you've got to prove at least 30% occupancy when this thing opens up. Because we want that economic activity in that area. Otherwise, this could be a real lemon on the Fox River. We don't want that.
Sure. Well, and in one of the letters, even going back to August 29th, to a letter to Mr. Doig from Mr. Kinney, we were asking to see additional equity from the developer, 20% minimum from the developer. And again, it goes kind of go back to, I asked a question on Tuesday. So where's Mr. Doig in all of this? Because now it sounds like C.D. Smith is becoming almost like a pseudo developer, that now
Yeah.
they're the person we're working with. And where's Mr. Doig in all of this now? Is this a brand new person or company or place that we're dealing with? And I don't know that would be the case if we were dealing with a bank that was backing this. I think
Exactly.
our conversations would still be with
Right.
Mr. Doig, and I'm confused as to the relationship from here on out.
Well, exactly. And, and a couple things about C.D. Smith. I guess the first is, they are a contractor. This is on public land with a substantial amount of public money. Where is the competitive bidding on this? I mean, how do they just get to have sole responsibility and sole say for how this is built?
That's a good question. Apparently, it sounds like that. I'm not sure that there will be open competitive bidding on that because they're going to fund the entire construction process, just as if someone else were building an apartment building somewhere in the community. I understand your point, though, of the public dollars being invested in that, and that's something we need to work out. What do the statutes say? And I heard most recently, actually last night at the county board meeting, there was a gentleman who spoke and talked about what's legally right
versus
or
what's
morally right. And I think we need to clarify what's legal.
Sure.
And then, do we feel comfortable with that, or do we want to kind of be a step beyond or above that and open that up? I don't know the answer to that, but I've just written it down to ask again.
Sure.
So
Well, and again, Doig is getting a substantial amount of public money, and I don't think that it is at all unreasonable to still insist that X number of units be pre-sold.
Yeah.
Other communities do that all the time, and if he doesn't want to meet that threshold, then let him or C.D. Smith or a combination of the two come up with 100% of the money. Don't give them any public money.
Yeah, exactly right. I want to move to the garbage fee. Are we done with Five Rivers, or do you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. The garbage fee, as you know, Brian, extremely controversial.
Yes.
You won't find many people in the city who like it. You
No,
don't like it.
I don't like it.
All right. Apparently, there's going to be a move to get a binding referendum on the ballot to remove that. How do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, any citizen can do that. I think it's their right to do that. That was one of the questions we had at the last Fifth Tuesday forum that I held, and I actually got some clarification from the city attorney on that. And he had said that essentially what we passed, the only binding referendum that could be out there is one that would actually set the fee for 2007. Because we've already written into our ordinances that we will have a fee-structured system for 2007 going into it. And that we haven't set the fee yet, but that they could conceivably have a binding referendum that would only set the fee but not actually eliminate the fee. They would have to set, I guess, I don't know if they could set the fee at zero.
Well,
that would be a question. And I believe Mr. Kraft told me that he either had a conversation with one of the persons involved with the petition process or was going to have in the near future, and this was a week or so ago when he was giving me that information.
Well, the council keeps saying they're going to look at the budget earlier this year, find solutions, but really, what's going to change? I don't see, what is the council going to find the next time they look at the budget that they didn't find last time?
Well, I'm hoping that it starts with our next meeting. We have a workshop set up where we have a comparison to comparable cities that we're going to get the results of that study, and we're going to find out where we are in spending, where we are in personnel, staffing, different areas. So that's going to be the basis of our first workshop. The next workshop, so I think it's the first meeting in July, is going to be a review of the fiscal year prior.
A comparison of overall spending?
It's going to be comparisons in terms of, I think in terms of size, spending, tax levies, tax rates, all those different comparisons is what my impression is that we're going to be
Is the city manager doing this research?
I believe it's coming from the League of Municipalities, or Wisconsin Municipalities, somewhere, either that or the Alliance of Cities. One of the two organizations is working with the city to do that.
Okay, so what if it turns out that City of Oshkosh, I predict this is going to be what they'll find.
Yeah.
That City of Oshkosh spending is either at the mean, average, or maybe a little below average.
Yeah.
So the conclusion from that, I think the city manager will pull is that, see, we need this fee.
Well, I disagree. I think it just it helps us understand where we are with comparables. That's a starting point. That's not the end all be all. We need to just have an idea of where we are. And then I want to review, I think Councilmember Bergtower brought this up last year, let's review the previous year's financials. Where do we overspend? Where do we underspend? Right. Because I think that's what's going to be the key. We've never really, the council, in my recollection as a whole, has never really looked back at prior spending and really looked at, okay, we allotted X amount of dollars, but we only spent this amount. Why are we allotting that much money? And and granted, it may only be 100,000 here or 100,000 there, but it could add up, and it does give us an idea of, I guess, budgeting projections that city staff make.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure that I understand the referendum thing. So so they cannot just put a binding referendum on the ballot that if it passes, it will remove the fee that's already in place for the last quarter of this year.
Correct. They can't do anything for 2006.
Because that, that was my impression the other night of what they're trying to accomplish.
Right, and I believe Mr. Kraft did say that he had a telephone conversation with someone about that, and he did clarify that for 2006, there's really nothing that a referendum can do, but it would only then be for 2007.
So they could then not still, even in 2007, they couldn't say, we prohibit the city council from putting a fee in place. But they could set it at 0, perhaps, is what you're saying?
That's my understanding. That's my understanding from the city attorney. And I can go back, and anyone can, if you want to go out to my website, you can go and get those notes. There's the question that I asked the city attorney, and then the response directly from him that's on there.
Sure.
So if I can put a little shameless plug in there for that,
Sure.
BryanBain.com, and just click on Fifth Tuesday Forum. That's where it is.
Brian, are you up for re-election in April of 07?
Yes.
Okay. I'm, Cheryl and I get out on the street a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm getting the feeling that there's brewing a movement out there to get out of office anybody who voted for this.
Sure.
Unless you guys find a way to get it out.
Sure.
Are you feeling the heat?
Well, you know what? I felt the heat in November when I tried twice to get it out of there. And I will say, the response, I felt it would have been irresponsible at the meeting that we voted on the fee to all of a sudden say, well, let's not implement the fee. And the city manager said what he would do. Up to 15 or 20 city employees at that point in time would lose their job. And I don't think that's fair to those employees at that point.
I agree completely. But Brian, this is what I think frustrates people.
Sure.
Almost everyone on that council, in what sounded like a PYA kind of thing, said, but I proposed these cuts, I proposed these cuts, I couldn't get enough votes for them.
Right.
But then why didn't you just vote no on the budget? The budget fails, and then at some point, someone is going to give in on those compromises. Because what's frustrating people is you're all passionately against the garbage fee, but you all vote for the budget that has it. Vote against the budget, and then at some point, maybe people would have come around to your compromises because we got to get a budget through. Would that make sense?
It does make sense. It does. It fully makes sense.
Just didn't do it.
Well, you have to decide and weigh in a $60 million budget what pieces will you decide I will vote against this entire budget if are or are not there. I still felt like we had some time to deal with that. We weren't able to deal with it. I liked the opportunity to include condominiums in this. That's the other piece of this. Although, I mean, it doesn't help the people who are going to have to pay the $30 extra in 2006. But I do like the piece of being able to treat a condominium owner the same as a homeowner, and that piece was a part of that.
Right.
And so there was a little bit of a compromise even within that. And I don't think that really the city staff was real excited about that along the way. And we did win that piece of it. We chiseled away a little bit, but ultimately, yes, the fee was instituted for 2006.
Sure.
So condominium owners will have their garbage picked up.
Yes.
I know that there was some discussion about that the trucks could only pick it up if they could go in a forward direction or whatever.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of confusion about that. Can you just kind of summarize real briefly?
All condominium associations will be included unless they as an association opt out. Doesn't matter how many units there are in the buildings, any condominium association will be included unless they opt out. And the truck can back up, forward, go backwards. Because the question I asked to the city manager is, don't we have city streets that it has to back up on? And if we do, then I think that's not a good argument to not pick up condos.
And frankly, I can't really imagine a condo association opting out when they're paying property taxes.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Is anyone doing any research in City Hall on, say, a variable rate garbage collection?
Right now they're doing research on and have, at our request, looking at a automation program of using a truck with the arm and picking up the garbage like similar communities do. So I know that they've begun to look at that. I would like, that was one of the things I talked about, is let's look at a volume-based or some other style of garbage collection. I would like to see some comparables in that in our budget that we get in 2006 for 2007.
But they are being looked at, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
well, maybe a little premature since those discussions are just sort of being held.
Sure.
But right now, if you have a couch, for example, you have to pay a special fee for that.
Right.
If we were to move to a volume-based system, a couch would obviously create substantial more volume for that week anyway. Would you envision a time when maybe the fee for special pickups be done away with and it all just be sort of combined into a volume-based system?
I think that's an option that we should look at. It should be on the table. I mean, we should look at it with it and we should look at it without it, just to kind of get an idea of what it would cost and what our benefits and negatives, positives would be.
Okay. I was going to move on to Miller's Bay. Is that
Oh,
right?
sure. Go ahead.
Okay. The Miller's Bay Pier
Yeah.
won't disappear, it seems.
Yeah.
Lots of citizens from the Menominee Drive area came
Sure.
to the council.
Sure.
All spoke, asking the council to rescind the decision to put the pier in
Right.
Miller's Bay. That's not
Right.
going to happen, is it?
Well, I won't be bringing it forward. I don't say.
Why not?
I won't because what they're providing, what they've provided, has not convinced me that we need to rescind that.
What about the Baridi report that,
Sure.
that talks about possible property devaluation?
Well, you know, you can also look at how parks also increase value population. I mean, there's some reports out there that, you know, actually having a park with open green space like there is in front of that pier, or that would be in front of that proposed pier, actually add to the value of the property. So,
okay.
and the issue that I had about the report, though, too, is that it painted some pictures that I don't think always that had all the most accurate information in it. My biggest issue was the crime issue,
Right.
where it talked about having a pier. This was the crime rate in that, but there was no comparison to the entire city's crime rate or what the crime rate was at those locations before they had the pier. And so it just said, here's a pier, here's a crime rate. We don't know if it's higher than the rest of the city, lower than the rest of the city, or anything.
One thing I don't understand, Brian, is if an organization gives a gift
Yeah.
to the city, doesn't then the city decide where it goes? I mean, if I get a Christmas gift, the person giving me the gift doesn't tell me, now you must use this gift here at these times.
Sure.
So it sounded like, and I have a great deal of respect for the Otter Street Fishing Club,
Yeah.
everyone does, but doesn't it sound like they have decided where this would go?
Well, and that was part of their proposal to the Parks Board. And again, I'll go back to that discussion. In that original discussion we had
Right.
at the Parks Board meeting, it was talked about that this pier was that this location was a part of a plan, and they've talked about it before. And I was under the assumption, going to my first Parks Board meeting, that must have been the case. I mean, everyone there was talking about it. So I assumed...
Everyone seemed to agree a few months ago, Brian, that if nothing else, something should be done about the way business gets from the Parks Board to the council. Nothing's changed, has it?
Well, actually, Tom Stefani has said to me that he will not put something on the agenda at a Parks Board meeting on a Monday night that would then go immediately to the council.
Oh, he won't
on a
do it
Tuesday.
anymore?
Nope. And actually, I think the city staff has made a conscious effort not to do that with any
But
proposal.
don't we need something written into the city ordinances?
Well, I don't know if if it would be an ordinance or a council rule, but
Right.
I had said if I did not get satisfaction in terms of that their
Okay.
word that they wouldn't do this, that's what I would pursue. And they've been very good about that. They've been conscious about it, and they've actually conceded to some council requests not to put things on the agenda until 2 weeks later to give public more opportunity.
Okay.
Cheryl?
Just real quickly, because I know you're going to have to leave, and we'll take a short break to
Sure.
allow you to do that. But the Angel in the Park issue,
Yeah.
very controversial for a while, and I think with some people it still is. You guys made your decision. They seem to be having some problems raising funds.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything more about if they're able to raise funds? Is it going to still go in the park? Are they looking at other options?
I haven't heard any feedback from the Parks Board or the organization involved in that process. My hope is that we would not go into this with a closed mind to negotiation on that. I think there's still a lot of is it religious? Is it not religious? I think it would be better served if we could find a public or more public space that actually is private space and actually have that be a part of that location. Maybe even along like the American Legion area.
Okay.
Of
All
the
right.
area,
Good.
so.
Well, listen, thanks very much for being here. Again, we know you've got to run, and we do appreciate you taking time out to be here for at least a part of the show. And I also wanted to thank you for getting citizen statements on Five Rivers moved up, or getting the topic moved on the
Yeah,
agenda so
yeah.
citizens could talk on that.
Well, that was important.
That was a very important
Yeah,
thing,
it is.
and I had to work that night and couldn't be there, but I appreciated your efforts anyway,
Thank you.
so thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, Tony and I will kind of wrap up some things, but we'll be right back, okay? Thanks.
We just escaped.
I escaped
I escaped
by foot.
and ran across a border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We want to again thank Bryan Bain for being here and talking about some of the more controversial issues going on in the city. Five Rivers, of course, is probably at the top of the list because of expense. I mean, it is a $60-some million project, and it has always been on a fast track, it seems, even though 2 years doesn't seem like real fast. But you know what I'm saying. It's the city has pushed it and pushed it and pushed it.
I just get the feeling that the Department of Community Development desperately wants to develop that land.
Well,
And I don't understand that. I mean, it's been waiting. It's been empty this long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the right project. So I think we should wait for the right project, personally.
Well, you know, I have never been against the project per se. It has the potential to be a wonderful project if it's done right, and if it's not done with such large chunks of our money without necessary precautions being put in place. I mean, I understand the need for TIFs. I understand the need for developer grants and subsidies and that kind of thing, but in the right conditions. And again, this has been used as a carrot. And when I say this, I mean the TIF itself. It has been used as a carrot. At least that's what Tom Doig, the developer here, told me. He told me that Jackson Kinney approached him about TIF money. And that's disturbing to me because, as we've talked about time and time and time again, Tony, townships can't use TIF money. They have to find other means to attract development. And in a community that has the potential that this city has, there's no reason that we can't be trying to attract developers and projects without holding out the proverbial TIF carrot all the time.
You know, one part of this project that has not gotten a lot of discussion at all, and I didn't even think about it until the other day. I got a call from, remember Bob Schultz? Bob and Connie Schultz?
Oh, sure.
All right. Bob called me after the council meeting, and he said, have you guys thought about the boat traffic? Because this is going to have 100 slips, isn't it, for boats?
Oh, at
on
least.
The right?
Yeah.
And he was talking about the consequences of that for the fish,
Mm-hmm.
the consequences for the bridges, the amount of times they'll have to open, and so on and so forth. No one's really talked about that yet, have they?
No, only from the standpoint of, you know, the floating docks
Yeah.
may not get approved by the DNR because of increased traffic. And so people have sort of related that to Five Rivers and said, well, you know, if the floating docks are an issue, what about this 100 and some slip pier?
Well, those bridges already go up an annoying high amount of times during the warm weather months.
Right,
What would that add
and
to
they're
it?
moving toward automating those bridges as well.
Yeah.
So that eventually those will all be done, they'll be opened and closed on an automated basis.
Well, I guess my point is, like everything else on this project, it seems like we move forward first and ask questions later. It's like the picture is upside down. Let's ask the questions first, and if it turns out not to be the right project for the area, let's not go with it.
Well, and you know, again, like I said when Bryan was still here, I mean, I didn't get to go and speak at the meeting because on Tuesdays I'm typically working, but I thought that you made some really wonderful comments. And, you know, why is it that we're not getting public buy-in on this? I mean, that is the way, and you said it at the meeting, I've said it time and time again on this show and in other venues, the way you get public buy-in for projects like this is to put it out there and be forthcoming with information. For some reason, city administration in Oshkosh just doesn't get it.
No.
They don't understand that that's the way to get public support for
Well, and
projects.
I think, not to give too much credit to our show, but I think the buy-in went even further down after the show we did with Dr. Beretti, who talked about the hidden costs of the TIF, that there's going to be a greater demand for city services when you have a project like that. And I think the taxpayers know it.
Yes.
And now that red flag to me got even redder when we heard at the Tuesday meeting that he may not have to have any pre-sold units.
Right.
I don't think we can allow a structure like that to go up unless we know there's going to be a substantial population in it from day one.
Well, exactly. And, you know, speaking of the show with Dr. Beretti, I got an email, it was either this morning or yesterday, from Councilman Dennis McHugh. He hadn't had a chance to see it when it aired. His wife had taped it. And he said it was just an excellent show. He thought it was just outstanding. He's talked to other people about it, and they want to see it. Apparently they didn't get to see it when it aired either. So, you know, I want to thank Dennis McHugh for those nice kudos. And it was a good show because it really pointed out, you know, the appropriate times to use TIFs and, and what the dangers are if you use those times and use TIFs inappropriately. And this, I think, is probably an inappropriate use for it. I understand that some of the property down there is contaminated from the previous uses, but after all, it is waterfront property. So why does that make it something that is necessary to put a TIF in? I've never understood that. But no, I think going back to the pre-sold units, I do think that we need to see that some are pre-sold.
Absolutely.
And even if it's not 50% as had been first talked about, certainly 30 or 35% like you had said earlier.
Yeah, because the Wall Street Journal and other reputable publications have said these condo hotel developments do not have a proven long-term track record.
No, even in places like Florida.
Exactly.
Where you've got oceanfront
Florida,
property.
Las Vegas, and other places.
Yeah.
And so it's especially going to be risky in a place like Oshkosh. And I defy this claim that there are no other ideas for that location. The chancellor, and I've said this before on this show, this living learning community idea, which is popular around the country, is something that was never looked at seriously here. And
now,
I think it is time to look at that.
Yeah, what really is that, Tony? Because I'm not sure that I know what that is either.
It's basically, it's envisioned as a mixed use for the land. Some retail, some affordable apartments, maybe even some condos, but not just a one type of big development like Five Rivers. And it's designed to house people that would work at the university, work downtown. It's designed to minimize energy use. People wouldn't have to drive as much and so on and so forth because they're working in the environment. I mean, there's all kinds of models for that. But it seemed to be here that it wasn't looked at seriously. There was an assumption from the Department of Community Development, apparently, that we just can't develop that here. And now we've spent the better part of 2 years on Five Rivers.
Yeah.
And I imagine that the Department of Community Development now feels a lot of commitment to this project. They spent so much time on it.
Well, sure, and I think that that's one of the reasons that they continue to push this thing forward. It remains on a fast track, and
I got to hand it to Bryan Bain. I mean, to come out and say, you don't often hear elected officials say that they've been duped.
No, you don't, and I give him tremendous credit for that, as well as for taking responsibility for, perhaps overlooking the fact that this was not going to be coming back to the council. But let's face it, we all are guilty of that because every single one of us, I think.
Right.
There may be a few people in the community who
Well,
didn't think it, but we certainly thought it was coming back.
Now the issue is what they're going to do with it. I mean, McHugh was ready to pull the plug on Tuesday night because he claims that the May 31st deadline was not met. I agree with him. Esslinger voted against the term sheet extension. I think that he has remained steadfast in opposition. Bain is upset at being duped. I don't see how you go forward with this with 3 members of the council opposed.
Well, they will. I mean, if there's 4 in support of it, rest assured they will.
And we're still not clear whether or not Meredith Shireman can even vote on this. But see, that's why there may not be any votes, right?
Well, I guess when we spoke with her last, and I think you probably talked to her more recently than I did, she is under the very distinct impression that she can vote on it. But, you know, Ben Ganther's company is part of this project.
Right.
And she has abstained from things that he's been involved with in the past.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm confused by how she can vote on some things that Ganther's involved in and other things that she can't. I don't understand that.
I don't understand that either. You asked Bryan when he was on the show in the last half hour about the competitive bidding and things like that. What about things like so if C.D. Smith has the entire contract to build, I imagine they'd subcontract out for some things, wouldn't they?
Oh, I'm sure that they would.
Now, how would the city would have no say in that?
I don't think so, because it's usually your general contractor, and I'm not a contractor, but from what I've always understood, it's the general contractor who subs out. I mean, that's what.
Because what I'm confused about is, I had thought for the past 2 years that one of the chief benefits of a $60 million project was that you were going to give a lot of contractors an opportunity for a piece of the pie, if you will.
Yeah.
But now that seems to have been eliminated.
Well, I don't think that that's going to happen. I really don't. I think that C.D. Smith will pick who they want to work with. And, you know, when I looked just the other day at Five Rivers' website, Ganther is still listed as a partner in this. You know, and that's what irritates me about this, Tony, is that the public, and I've said this from day one, the public is a partner in this also. It's called a public-private partnership. And yet the public portion of the partnership has been kept in the dark from the very beginning, and we still don't have answers. The council, as it's turning out, has less answers than what they thought. They have more questions than they have answers. And I do think that we've all been taken for a ride in this. And it really is time to get answers up front and have a proactive approach to this rather than reactionary management, which is what we've seen time and time again on projects.
Well, if you had to make a prediction at this point, do you think this is going to get built?
I think that it will, unfortunately. Because, and I say unfortunately, despite what I said earlier about the fact that it has potential, and I'm not against it as a project per se. I think that if it's done right and it's financed properly and enough protections are put in place to protect whatever money we're putting into this, and the developer and or developers are forthcoming with information, then I think that we might want to look at going forward with this. But I think right now, I mean, I've become very cynical about this, and I think that this is probably going to go forward with few answers coming to some of the questions that are out there, or sort of mamsy-pamsy answers coming, and I don't know. I think that our council is finally asking some very good questions.
And maybe too little, too late.
Unfortunately.
We'll soon see. How about the garbage issue? We talked to Bryan about that. There is I can't remember the last time I saw this much anger on the streets. Have you seen how mad people are at this?
Yeah, they are.
You know, you could think about it and say, okay, it's only $10 a month. But people are feeling it as a big slap in the face.
Well, especially when we've got money to throw around on these other things.
That's the thing.
And, you know, they can talk all they want about that some of it is capital improvements budgets and some of it is general operating budgets, and, you know, you don't know which pocket it's coming from. And that's all fine and well, but the bottom line is we're spending money on a lot of these things that we don't need to be spending money on.
Well, and I tell you, I don't know how I feel about an election campaign being run on garbage. But I think in April '07, that is going to be the issue.
Yeah,
and I think all those counselors who voted for this, I think they need to realize they are in big trouble. This actually reminds me, remember years ago, the 20th Avenue extension?
Yes.
When there were, candidates supported that, and they thought, okay, well, no big deal. And then everyone who supported that got voted out. And this is what it's feeling like to me. I haven't seen this kind of rumbling since then.
Yeah. Although, you know what, I mean, I think that people sometimes have short memories. And look at the uproar that there was over the property reassessments, the revaluation that came through. And we've just all sort of accepted that and gone on.
But see, that one, it was easy to blame the city manager's office, right? They didn't communicate well, yada, yada, yada. This one, this is an easy vote to point to. And they're going to, they're going to spin, bamboozle. But I think that there's a segment of the population out there, massive, that is saying, you know what you did, and we know who you are.
Yeah.
Now, I don't like the idea that that could be the major issue, but it's out there. And
it is.
If I were this council, I would work very hard right now to make sure that fee disappears as soon as possible.
Well, and I was in favor. I'm not in favor of the fee per se, but I certainly was not in favor of them yanking it off at the one meeting a month or so ago when they could have.
Oh, yeah.
Because where would they have come up with $600 and some thousand, right then and there, if they weren't able to 6 or 7 months prior to that. So I figured that it was probably the worst of two evils, or the better of two evils, rather, to just leave it on the books for the final quarter of this year and work very diligently to make sure that it doesn't go into effect in 2007.
I had the feeling that when McHugh called for that, I thought in many ways he was suggesting that City Hall was bluffing, that in fact there wouldn't be all this damage, and that he was going to require them to come up with the specifics and whatnot, and the council decided against that. But clearly someone would have to suffer. There's no way you can get rid of $600,000 and do it painlessly.
No, but the question becomes, can it be done without touching police and fire? And those two entities have to remain as they are.
And by the way, you and I agree on this. This is another classic example of how Madison is literally torturing local communities. Everything we're talking about right now on this garbage fee is a direct result of what they've done in Madison.
Yes.
They've tried to massacre that shared revenue program, and now look at where we are. They've come up with wacky tax schemes, and now we're all, at the local level, we're all at each other's throats over this. And they get held harmless.
Right. Well, they may have some surprises coming for them, too,
I hope they
at
do,
election time.
Because that really is where the problem is.
Oh, sure it is. They cannot get their own house in order. They never have been able to, but yet they want to point the finger down the ladder at the municipalities and say, you need to do a better job. Well, how about, it starting at home? And that's what they should be doing, but they're not.
Right. And as you suggest, it is a little bit, it is difficult for people to accept other expenditures when they see the garbage fee. So like last year when we spent all that money on the golden commodes, if you will. There are nice bathrooms at the Leach.
I've not been in there.
I'm not complaining about. Oh, you haven't been there yet?
No. Nope.
Okay. I expect there are many people like you.
And not because I'm not going in protest.
You're not boycotting it, no.
No, I just I knew from the outset that it would probably not be a venue that I visited very often. I mean, that's not to say that I won't at some point, but so far in the first year and few months that it's been up, no, I haven't.
What about Miller's Bay? I was somewhat surprised to hear Bryan essentially say that the Bariti study on that didn't do much for him.
No, it didn't seem to really impact him at all, and he's not going to bring it back. So, and I don't see anybody else really moving toward bringing it back either.
I don't think the council. The only hope those neighbors have at this point is the DNR, and there is going to be, I guess, one more kind of appeal hearing. I'm not sure what it is, but.
Isn't that what's going on right now?
It's going on right now, yeah. I did find out that Scott Hassett, who was the DNR secretary, is a UW Oshkosh graduate. Now, maybe does that give him some special connection to Oshkosh, especially its park system? I mean, I don't know. Because I thought that out of all the citizens who spoke on that, most of them made sense, but one that made a great deal of sense was Jan Moldenhauer, who talked about how if you look at Menominee Park, it really is, for the most part, a playground now. And that Millers Bay area does seem to be pretty much the only parkland left.
Yeah.
And, you know, this idea about people having to walk 2,000 feet to a bathroom, I don't understand. I'm like Mr. Esslinger, who said he doesn't fish, and I don't know about. I don't understand why, if you had a chance to put a pier closer to facilities, why you wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, and again, you had said earlier about, you know, respect for the Otter Street Fishing Club. I think we all appreciate what they have done for this community, and they have done a lot. I just don't understand why they are so hell-bent on that particular location and will not even consider any other parcel of land in this community. It again, it defies logic to me.
No, I don't get that either, and maybe this is where the city council needs to take more leadership in bringing people together. I mean, I think there was some attempt at that, but the attempt didn't go on long enough.
No, and you know, we've seen at least one member of the Otter Street Fishing Club, Terry Wooler, who is also on the Parks Commission, who I think has just shown, you know, you talk about someone who has shown disrespect for people. He has shown absolute contempt for the very citizens in this community who some of whom anyway will probably be enjoying this pier.
And you know, one thing he said was that the group has already spent $10,000, and that if the city were to rescind at this point, they'd have to reimburse. And what I don't get about that is, why would an organization spend money while something is still in appeal?
Right.
They knew it was under DNR appeal.
Right.
Is it the city's fault that a group would spend money while something's under appeal?
Right. And that's why I think that if they did rescind it, and the Otter Street Fishing Club tried to sue the city for that money, I don't think that it would be, you know, upheld in court, because you're absolutely right. Why spend money? Why would they have done that? That's foolhardy to spend money when something is such a contentious issue and being appealed at every turn.
Have you had a chance to follow this issue of the Diebold touchscreen machines being brought into the
Not nearly
polling places?
not nearly as closely as you have.
All right, the county board, we're taping on June 15th. On June 20th, the county board is going to vote on whether or not to accept grant money that would be used to purchase these machines. A lot of opposition to them. It may end up back at the localities. The city council may have to decide whether or not to bring this machine in. And I tell you, I have all kinds of concerns about Diebold touchscreen machines. In fact, people can go to my website, tonypalmeri.com, and there's a link for touchscreen voting. You can see tons and tons of articles on there about this, and I really think you should contact your elected officials on this.
Absolutely.
Very important issue.
All right. Well, with that, we are out of time for this edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I want to thank Bryan Bain for being here for the first 35 minutes or so. Tony, thanks to you. And as always, thanks to you for allowing us into your homes for the last hour. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.